On a Friday afternoon in November, the most powerful man in the world of technology sat in a luxury hotel room in Las Vegas, surrounded by the high-octane roar of Formula One racing. Sam Altman, the face of the artificial intelligence revolution, was at the summit of his influence. He had just returned from a global tour where he was treated with the reverence of a head of state and the celebrity of a pop icon. But at approximately noon Pacific time, a notification appeared on his screen, a link to a Google Meet. When he logged on, he did not see colleagues ready to discuss the next breakthrough. He saw 4 members of his own board staring back at him with a cold, unified finality. Within minutes, without a single formal allegation of crime or financial impropriety, the architect of ChatGPT was fired from the company he had helped build into an $80 billion empire. The board's public statement was a masterpiece of corporate ambiguity. Sam Altman, they claimed, had not been consistently candid in his communications. It was a line that would trigger 5 days of corporate warfare, exposing a deep and jagged rift between 2 irreconcilable visions of the human future. On one side stood a board convinced they were saving humanity from a deceptive leader racing toward a digital god. On the other, an army of employees and investors who believed the board had just committed the greatest act of sabotage in the history of Silicon Valley. In those 5 days, the legal guardrails of a multi-billion-dollar nonprofit would collide with the raw structural power of compute monopolies and venture capital. By the time the dust settled, the company would be restored, but the mission that had defined its birth would be dead. To understand why a board would commit professional suicide to stop their own CEO, one has to look past the shiny products and into a 70-page dossier that had been quietly growing for over a year. Ilya Sutskever, OpenAI's chief scientist and a man often described as a mystic of the machine, had become haunted by a pattern of behavior. This dossier, compiled from secret Slack messages, internal testimony, and personal phone logs, did not describe a criminal. It described a pathological liar. The board members, including AI policy expert Helen Toner and entrepreneur Tasha McCauley, had come to believe that Altman was a master of a specific, dangerous paradox. An intense, almost desperate desire to be liked, paired with a sociopathic lack of concern for the truth required to maintain that image. The tension had reached a breaking point over a seemingly dry academic paper. Helen Toner had co-authored a report for Georgetown's Center for Security and Emerging Technology that was slightly critical of OpenAI's safety signals while praising a rival firm, Anthropic. When the paper was published, Altman allegedly didn't just disagree with its findings. He began a calculated campaign to remove Toner from the board, reportedly lying to other directors about her motives and her impact on the company's standing with federal regulators. To the board, this was the final proof. They were trapped in a structure Altman himself had designed, a nonprofit board with the legal power to fire the CEO to protect the mission of safe AI, even if that decision destroyed the company's value. Toner would later remark that if destroying OpenAI was the only way to fulfill their mission of stopping an unsafe race to superintelligence, then they were legally bound to pull the trigger. There was also the shadow of a secret breakthrough. In the days before the firing, word began to circulate among the board members of an internal model named Q-Star. This model was different from the chatbots the world had seen. It was demonstrating an ability to perform novel mathematical reasoning, effectively showing the first signs of a digital internal monologue that could plan through complex problems. While Altman saw a product that would define the next century of economic value, some researchers saw a technology that had cleared a dangerous event horizon without any of the promised safety checks. They sent a warning letter to the board. Altman was moving too fast. When the blow finally landed on Friday afternoon, the board expected a messy transition. They did not expect a total collapse of reality. Altman was told of his firing 5 minutes before the public press release went live. Moments later, Greg Brockman, the company's president and Altman's most loyal ally, was told he was being stripped of his chairmanship. He responded with 3 words, "I quit," and walked away. The ripples moved with the speed of a digital virus. At the OpenAI headquarters in San Francisco, employees who had just become paper millionaires in a pending share sale watched their wealth evaporate as the board essentially declared war on their own leader. By Friday night, Altman had set up a war room at his $27 million mansion. He brought in Chris Lehane, a legendary crisis communications advisor, and Brian Chesky, the CEO of Airbnb, they understood something the board had completely ignored. In Silicon Valley, legal authority is a ghost, but talent and compute are the only two things that are real. They didn't just plan a legal defense, they planned a counter-coup designed to make the board's position untenable within 48 hours. Saturday morning brought the fury of the giants. Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, had learned of the firing only minutes before the world did. Microsoft had poured $13 billion into OpenAI, not to support a nonprofit safety mission, but to secure the exclusive rights to the technology Sam Altman promised to deliver. Nadella was reportedly furious. He realized that while the board held the legal deeds to the office and the logos, Microsoft held the keys to the physical supercomputers OpenAI required to exist. Without Microsoft's Azure cloud, OpenAI's code was just a collection of static files. Simultaneously, the venture capital firm Thrive Capital, led by Josh Kushner, executed a move of surgical precision. Thrive was in the middle of a tender offer that would allow employees to sell their shares at an $86 billion valuation. As soon as Altman was fired, Thrive paused the deal. The message to the 770 employees was unspoken but deafening. If you want your life-changing payout, Sam Altman has to come back. The board's abstract mission of protecting future generations was now in direct, violent conflict with the bank accounts of the people currently sitting at the desks. By Sunday, the atmosphere at the San Francisco headquarters was surreal. Altman arrived at the office not as an employee, but as a guest, wearing a visitor's badge that he mockingly photographed for social media with the caption, "First and last time I ever wear one of these." He sat in a conference room while his team and Microsoft negotiated with a board that was increasingly isolated. The board tried to stand firm. They interviewed other potential CEOs, looking for someone who shared their fear of the machine. They approached Dario Amodei at Anthropic, even suggesting a merger to consolidate the safety-first factions of the industry. Amodei refused. Finally, they found Emmett Shear, the former CEO of Twitch, a man who had publicly stated that the probability of doom from AI was high enough to warrant extreme caution. When the board announced Emmett Shear as the new interim CEO late Sunday night, they thought they had won. They were wrong. Within hours, Satya Nadella delivered the final blow. He announced that Microsoft would be hiring Sam Altman, Greg Brockman, and most importantly, any OpenAI employee who chose to resign. He effectively offered to recreate OpenAI inside Microsoft's walls, leaving the original board in possession of a hollow legal shell with no employees and no compute. Monday morning began with a visual representation of a company in total revolt. A letter began to circulate among the staff, demanding the board's resignation and Altman's return. By noon, it was signed by over 700 of the company's 770 employees, including the interim CEO the board had just appointed, Mira Murati. But the most shocking name on the list was at the very top, Ilya Sutskever, the man who had orchestrated the firing. The chief scientist who had spent a year building the dossier on Altman's deceptions had switched sides. The catalyst for this dramatic reversal was not a change in the facts, but an emotional collapse. On Sunday night, Anna Brockman, the wife of Greg Brockman, had met with Sutskever in the office. In a room where the future of the species was being debated, history was shifted by a single human interaction. Anna, whose wedding Sutskever had officiated only 4 years prior, wept as she pleaded with him to reconsider, invoking their friendship in the destruction of the community they had built. Faced with the prospect of being the man who destroyed the world's greatest collection of talent, Sutskever broke. He tweeted a public apology stating he deeply regretted his participation in the board's actions. With Sutskever's defection, the board was checkmated. They had no army left to lead. Late Tuesday night, a deal was reached. Sam Altman would return as CEO, but he would not initially take a seat on the board. In exchange, the board members who had opposed him, Helen Toner and Tasha McCauley, would resign immediately. A new board was assembled featuring heavyweight business figures like former Salesforce CEO Brett Taylor and former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers. The era of academic safety-first oversight was over. The era of scalable execution had begun. The office that night erupted into a slap-happy, adrenaline-fueled celebration. Someone turned on a smoke machine, setting off the fire alarms, while employees hugged and cried in the hallways. Greg Brockman took a group selfie with the cheering crowd and posted it with a simple, defiant caption, "We are so back." But as the smoke cleared and the celebration faded, the true cost of the weekend began to emerge. The blip, as the employees began to call it, had fundamentally altered the company's DNA. To fulfill a condition of his return, Altman agreed to an independent investigation by the law firm WilmerHale. Months later, the investigation cleared him, stating his conduct did not mandate removal, but the process itself was a masterclass in corporate opacity. No written report was ever produced. The findings were delivered only orally to the new board members, a decision made specifically to avoid a paper trail that could be discovered by regulators or the public. The 70-page dossier that had caused the firing was buried, its contents reduced to a breakdown in trust. In the year that followed, the safety commitments OpenAI had once championed were systematically dismantled. The superalignment team, which had been promised 20% of the company's total compute power to solve the problem of human control, received only 1 to 2%. The researchers who had warned the board, including Ilya Sutskever and Jan Leka, eventually resigned, stating that safety culture had taken a back seat to shiny products. Altman, once the cautious advocate for regulation, began making deals with the Pentagon and courted trillions of dollars from Middle Eastern sovereign wealth funds to build massive data centers that would consume the electricity of entire cities. The weekend Sam Altman lost everything was the weekend he truly gained total control. It was the moment the nonprofit experiment died, and OpenAI became what its founders once swore it would never be, a conventional, aggressive, profit-driven tech giant. The board had the legal authority to stop him, but they didn't have the structural power. They learned that in the race for the ultimate technology, a legal charter is no match for $13 billion and the tears of a friend. History did not change because of a code breakthrough or a financial report. It changed because a few individuals in a series of rooms made specific, irreversible decisions. The board decided to act without a plan for the staff. Satya Nadella decided to weaponize his monopoly, and Ilya Sutskever decided that his loyalty to his colleagues was more important than his fear of the future. We are now living in the world created by those decisions, a world where the most powerful technology in history is being developed by a man whose own board concluded could not be trusted with the button. The question that remains for the rest of us is no longer how to govern the machine, but how to govern the people who are racing to build it.